The movie opens with a montage of scenes from a Saturday morning in the home of Miami-based waitress Jess. She is a single mother and her son Tommy is on the autism spectrum. The very first scene shows Tommy crying, seemingly upset over something that he just saw. Jess comforts him and says that he simply had a nightmare. In the second scene, Jess is picking up Tommy's expensive toy from the pool outside while the little kid is busy painting in his coloring book in the kitchen. The scene quickly cuts to Jess sweeping up spilled paint from the kitchen floor. She ends up staining her floral dress, which makes her very angry. At this moment, someone rings the bell to her front door, but when she goes to check, there is no one outside. The scene shifts once more and Jess, now dressed in a white top and jean shorts, hurriedly packs a big duffel bag with her clothes. She then grabs the keys to her home and gets ready to go somewhere when suddenly her eyes fall on a sticky note on the refrigerator. It is a reminder to meet her friend Greg at the Florida harbor at 8:30 a.m. that very day. Following this, Jess loads the duffel bag into the back of her car with great effort, as if it has something very heavy inside. The mother and son then make their way to the Florida harbor, where a private yacht named the Triangle is waiting for them. The yacht's owner Greg has organized a small trip to sea for some of his friends, including Jess. The first people to arrive at the harbor are Sally, her husband Downey, and their friend Heather. Soon afterward, Greg's onboard helper Victor arrives, closely followed by a very exhausted-looking Jess. The strange thing is that Tommy is nowhere to be seen. Greg rushes towards Jess with a huge smile and asks if she is doing all right, but before he can question further, she hugs him and apologizes. The confused captain tells her that they can cancel the trip if she doesn't want to go. However, she insists on taking the voyage. So without further delay, they set sail into the ocean under clear blue skies. After a while, the extremely exhausted Jess falls asleep in the cabin. She experiences a dream where she sees herself being washed up on a shore, but seconds later Heather arrives in the cabin, which wakes her up. As the two share a glass of champagne, Jess looks slightly lost, as if she has forgotten the events prior to her falling asleep. Shortly afterward, Heather and Jess join the rest on the deck, where Victor alerts everyone that the wind has completely died down. Downey then sees an approaching storm, and dark, intimidating clouds quickly replace the clear blue skies. Concerned, Greg contacts the Coast Guard on the radio and conveys their predicament, but the communication between the Triangle and the Coast Guard is intercepted by another call from a nearby ship. Greg hears a female voice shouting that everyone on board is dead. Worried, Greg asks for her coordinates, but the communication is abruptly cut off as the storm hits their yacht. Victor and Greg rush to the deck, trying to avert any potential disaster, while the rest huddle up in the cabin with life jackets on. The yacht eventually overturns and Heather ends up drowning in the water. In a surprising turn of events, the freakish storm passes as quickly as it came. The clear blue skies return once again, and the remaining 5 passengers sit upon the overturned yacht. But they don't have to remain stranded for long, as a large cruise ship named Elis floats into their view. A relieved Downey notices the silhouette of someone looking at them from the deck and waves enthusiastically. Soon the ship passes by close enough for them to climb on board. As the 5 move through the desolate corridors, it seems like there's no one on the ship. In the meantime, Jess gets a feeling of deja vu, as if she had previously seen these corridors. Downey diverts their attention to an old framed picture in the corridor. It says the ship Elis was constructed in 1932 and explains the Greek mythology behind its name. Aeolus is the father of Sisyphus, a man who was condemned by the gods to push a rock up a mountain for eternity. Suddenly they hear a loud clanking sound, the noise of something falling on the ground. Victor investigates it, only to find a keyring with 2 separate keys and a picture of a young boy. To Jess' surprise, she recognizes that the keyring belongs to her and the picture is of her son. This confuses her, and she swears that she had the keys when she boarded the yacht. Next, the 5 stumble into a ballroom with neatly arranged food, as if there were preparations for a feast. As they are looking around, Jess sees the reflection of someone in the mirror and alerts the others. Victor immediately goes in search of this mysterious person. Shortly afterward, Greg and Jess leave to find the captain of the ship, asking Sally and Downey to wait in the ballroom for Victor. In the next scene, Jess and Greg are walking past the deserted corridor when their attention is drawn to the sound of running water coming from room 237. On the room's mirror, they find a message written in blood: "Go to theater." Greg dismisses the message as some prank by the ship's crew, but Jess is thoroughly spooked. As a result, they get into a mild argument, and she decides to return to the ballroom while Greg walks toward the theater. When Jess reaches the ballroom, she is surprised that Downey and Sally are not there. Seconds later, a blood-soaked Victor arrives and immediately tries to strangle her. However, she notices a nasty gash on the back of his head and presses it until Victor passes out from the pain. Before she can catch her breath, the sound of a loud gunshot forces her to run to the theater, where she finds Greg with a large bullet wound in his abdomen. To her horror, Sally and Downey are also there, and they accuse her of this horrific act. They claim that before dying, Greg revealed that she was the one who shot him. Downey also questions Jess on why she asked them to come to the theater. Confused, she denies even meeting them since she and Greg left the ballroom. Just then, a mysterious masked figure starts shooting at them from the upper gallery of the theater. Sally and Downey are immediately killed while Jess runs away. The masked killer chases her, and after a brief game of cat and mouse, the two meet on the middle deck of the ship. Jess grabs an emergency axe that is hung on the ship's wall and surprisingly overpowers the murderer. With no bullets left in the gun, the masked figure mutters, "It's the only way to get home," and then repeats the phrase, "Kill them." But Jess ignores these words and takes a big swing with her axe, causing the killer to fall off the ship. Now everyone on board is dead, making her the lone survivor of this bizarre event, but Jess doesn't get much time to reflect on the traumatic incident as she hears several voices yelling from the vast ocean beyond the ship. In a shocking twist of events, Jess witnesses 5 stranded people on the back of an upturned yacht nearby the ship. Those 5 people are none other than Greg, Victor, Sally, Downey, and herself. The new Downey sees her silhouette on the deck and waves at her, although he has no idea it's her. The new group then boards the ship and everything happens just as it previously occurred. The survivor Jess spies on the newly boarded Jess, who is hit with feelings of deja vu. Later in the corridor, the survivor Jess accidentally drops her keyring and flees before anyone catches her. Just as it had happened previously, Victor finds the keyring along with the photo of Tommy attached to it. In the next scene, survivor Jess goes to the ballroom and hides behind a pillar. Once again, the group arrives there and the new Jess catches a glimpse of her in the mirror. Scared, she runs away, but the new Victor finds her on the deck. Survivor Jess reveals to him that there is a copy of herself downstairs in the ballroom and that they're all going to die. As the conversation between the two becomes intense, Victor backs up toward the deck's wall and accidentally crashes his head against 2 sharp pins. The impact causes a deadly gash on the back of his head. This freaks survivor Jess out, so she runs toward the engine room of the ship. There, neatly tucked in a cabinet, she finds the crew uniform which the masked killer was wearing. Nearby, she also finds several shotguns along with ammunition. By this time, she realizes that the events that previously happened are repeating themselves. Hence, there will be someone who will shoot the new Sally and new Downey in the theater. Survivor Jess then takes the shotgun, goes to the ballroom, and hides behind a pillar just as the new Jess encounters the bloodied Victor. But what happens next didn't occur in the previous loop. The survivor Jess encounters her other self, making her run away in shock and consequently stopping her from accidentally killing Victor. Nevertheless, Victor seems to have lost too much blood and passes away on the ballroom floor. By the time survivor Jess reaches the theater, Greg is already dead, but Sally and Downey are still alive. The masked killer also shows up on the balcony and survivor Jess shoots at them. The bullet barely misses the top of the killer's head but causes a flesh wound which begins to bleed. Using this opportunity, Sally, Downey, and survivor Jess run away from the theater to an empty corridor. She then gives the gun to Downey and runs off to the ballroom where new Victor had passed out moments ago. But his body is not there and the blood trail on the floor indicates that he was dragged outside and thrown overboard. Meanwhile, Downey notices someone approaching them from the other end of the corridor and fires a few warning shots. Unbeknownst to him, the approaching figure is the masked killer, who now hides behind a wall. In a shocking twist, the killer takes off the mask, revealing herself to be another version of Jess. At this point, there are 3 versions of Jess on the ship: the survivor Jess, the new Jess, and this killer Jess. After unmasking herself, killer Jess persuades the husband and wife to follow her. She takes them to room 237, where she brutally slashes Downey's throat with a knife and stabs Sally in the stomach. The injured Sally manages to slip away from the room, and while running from the murderer, she comes across the radio room. She grabs the microphone and sends out a desperate message for help. This message goes straight to another version of Greg, whose yacht is yet to be overturned by the storm. But before Sally can convey the complete message, she hears footsteps following her and rushes away to the uppermost deck. To her horror, there are several versions of herself lying lifeless on the deck with seagulls pecking at the corpses. The survivor Jess soon arrives at the deck, and despite the shock of seeing the corpses, she consoles the dying Sally. She also witnesses the fight between the new Jess and the unmasked murderous Jess. Just like before, the killer is thrown off the ship. Almost immediately, yet another group of 5 stranded passengers arrives near the ship and a new cycle starts. It is now obvious to original Jess that the ship Elis has been caught in a time loop. The 5 stranded people arrive from the upturned yacht, then are killed one by one, only for the events to restart once more. Now the survivor Jess, aka the original Jess, is destined to become the masked killer. She knows that the loop will continue to happen until she can stop the 5 stranded passengers on the upturned yacht from coming aboard the Elis. For this to happen, she will have to kill everyone on the ship right now, including the latest version of herself. Following this, the original Jess goes to room 237, where she finds the corpse of Downey. She drags it out to the deck and throws it into the sea. Then, using his blood, she writes "Go to theater" in the mirror of room 237. Next, she visits the latest version of Downey and Sally and tells them to go to the theater. She then goes to the engine room, where the crew uniform dons a mask with 2 eye holes and carries a shotgun. The original Jess has now become the killer Jess. She goes to the upper gallery of the theater and points her gun at the new Greg, who identifies her by looking at the slippers. Before he can make sense of what is happening, the original Jess shoots him, followed by Sally and Downey. The new version of Jess escapes, just like what happened during the first time loop. The events then repeat themselves as the masked Jess fights it out with the latest version of Jess on the deck outside. And just like in the first loop, the Jess who had recently boarded the ship wins. The original Jess, still behind a mask, is out of bullets and mutters, "It's the only way to save our son. You have to kill them before falling into the sea." But she does not die, as she gets washed up on the shores and finds her way home from the beach. There she sees another Jess in her home who is yet to board the yacht. As she watches herself hiding near a bush, the scenes from the opening montage repeat themselves, but in detail. It turns out that Jess had been a horrible mother to Tommy. She yells at the little kid for leaving the expensive toy ship in the pool and curses him. The original Jess feels guilty for her actions and peeks in through the window. Inside, Tommy is painting in the kitchen and he suddenly sees her glancing in. He gets spooked and drops the paint on the floor. Soon afterward, the abusive Jess comes to the kitchen and gets enraged seeing the mess. She slaps the boy and tells him to go to his room. She then begins cleaning the paint, which also stains her floral dress. Upon witnessing all this, the original Jess instantly comes up with a plan. She gets a hammer from the yard, rings the doorbell, and with her angry version distracted, she enters the home. When the angry Jess comes back and she kills her using the hammer. Unfortunately, Tommy watches it all unfold from a distance. This makes him cry, so the original Jess consoles him, saying it was just a bad dream. In the aftermath, she packs her clothes and the corpse in a large duffel bag. The original Jess then puts the bag in the trunk and gets into the car with Tommy. While driving towards the harbor, a seagull crashes into the car's windshield, creating a splash of blood on it. The original Jess stops the car, takes the dead bird, and goes to throw it on the beach. To her horror, she sees a pile of dead seagulls thrown at the exact spot. This means that she is still stuck in an infinite loop. Disturbed by this, she starts driving again, but Tommy screams at the blood on the windshield. While the original Jess is momentarily distracted by his screams, the car veers slightly and gets bumped against an oncoming truck. It is launched into the air and crashes several meters away in the middle of the road. The surrounding onlookers rush to the spot, and as the camera pans up, the dead bodies of Jess and Tommy lie on the ground. However, the dead Jess is wearing a floral dress with paint stains on it, indicating that it is the version that was killed by the hammer. The original Jess, who is wearing a white top and jean shorts, is miraculously unscathed, but looks shaken by the crash. No one notices her except for a local taxi driver. He tells her that there is nothing she can do to save Tommy and that she must move on from this horrible sight. Reluctantly, the original Jess asks him to take her to the Florida harbor. In the final scene, the taxi reaches its destination and Jess leaves for the dock without paying. There she sees Victor, who asks her about Tommy. Clearly shaken by the car crash, she lies to him and says Tommy is in school. She then goes to Greg, hugs him, and joins the others on the yacht, which is about to set sail. The loop continues and the screen cuts to black.